Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and these are my co hosts.
It's for Wells.
I'm not.
We appreciate all the support on recent content. And before we get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
We're back at it again. We appreciate everybody who joined us for that live stream at the trade deadline. But we got some trades to get into since we'll basically break them down and talk about them in this episode. One of the kind of interesting themes of the trade deadline was it felt like the teams that made the splashiest moves, aside from Cleveland, right, was the lottery teams, right? You look at the Wizards, right? Obviously, they made the blockbuster move trading for AD. Utah Jazz, they ended up trading for Jaren Jackson Jr. But, we can kind of get into these, right? So I guess we'll start off with the Cavs, right, as a contending team, right? Obviously, they made the big splash, the big surprise, right, leading up to the deadline, actually, before, where they ended up swapping Darius Garland for James Harden, right? So that was initially reported by Chris Mannix, I believe, of Sports Illustrated. And eventually it kind of started to build and build and build. And basically, like when you watch Cleveland or when you look at what Cleveland did, it seemed like they were pretty much done with Garland, right? Unfortunately, even though we've talked about him before in years past, really good player, had a great year last year. But unfortunately for him, he hasn't been able to stay healthy, hasn't really been available for the postseason much either, and hasn't had like a ton of great postseason performances, right? We just haven't really seen the best version of him a lot, and we've talked about best ability being availability, and James Harden has been the more available player, and honestly, this season at least, he's been better, right? He's 36, so there's a big age gap in terms of the 10-year difference, but he's averaging 25 and 8. The efficiency has kind of dropped from since earlier in the season, but basically, if you're Cleveland, it's a quote unquote win now, short term, not as much time move. I guess you also look at he's going to have a player option that will be only partially guaranteed in the summer. And then you can probably re sign him if you wish for less money per year. The Clippers, we can get on them soon, right? They clearly decided to look at themselves sort of as semi sellers, right? Considering what they did with Zubac. But, for both teams, I guess for Cleveland, we know what Harden can do at this point, right? He is what he is. It really comes down to the playoffs, right? Because in the 2 games he's played for the Cavs, right, he was a big part of their wins, right, in terms of late fourth quarter execution. But we do know that come playoff time, he's certainly capable of having big playoff performances. We've seen it, but he's also capable of being a ghost, being invisible, right? Like the first year we did the podcast when it was Philly Boston, right? He was probably the best player for the first half of that series. Then in game 6 and 7, he was gone. You didn't see him. He wasn't there. I mean, he was, but he really wasn't. So he's had that history. And then for the Clippers, right, you get Garland, right, who hasn't played yet, but you're just basically banking on the youth, right? Clearly the Clippers are probably kind of looking at this year and they're like, okay, we've actually been awesome since that horrific start. But what is it probably going to lead us to, right? Are we actually going to be able to make a championship run? Probably not, right? They're 2 games under 500 now. They're 25 and 27 as of this recording, with a chance to potentially move up because they're only a couple of losses behind the Blazers and the Warriors. But even if they get there, at best, right, you're either going to be 7 or 8. If you're 8, you play OKC. And if you're 7, you're probably going to play like Spurs, Nuggets, whomever. And that's probably just not an ideal scenario, right? So they also move Zubac for picks, but we'll mostly for now start with the Cavs. Clippers one. I mean, I guess like if you're the Cavs, you do it because you don't believe in Garland. It just kind of stings to give up on a young player who was really good. He was great last year. But I do want to see what it looks like because I think he can help the bigs with his passing and his playmaking. I guess he can help him get to the line. If he has a stinky game, you can have Donovan Mitchell probably pick up the slack because he's historically a really good playoff performer. And for all of the weirdness that we've seen from the Cavs this year, all the uncertainty, they're sitting right there in the 4 spot, only a couple games back from 2 and 3. So as long as they can win at the rate they're winning at, they should be a home court advantage team this year. So I don't mind it for Cleveland. For Clippers, like I said, they're probably giving up on their contending window. We'll see what happens with Kawhi. But I do want to see what it looks like come playoff time because that's what it is for Harden at this point, right? This is probably his last chance to really be able to really realistically contend for anything at this point, considering he's been on seemingly a new team every other year.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about this move. I know when it first happened, obviously we talked about it a little bit off YouTube or whatever, and I just wasn't really a fan of it. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I think the move reeks of desperation
Mhm.
from the Cleveland side, right? Like, I feel like I just don't like them bailing on Darius Garland. Granted, this year he's been horrendous, right? Can't even stay on the floor, and when he is on the floor, nowhere near the level that you would expect him to be, and we know that this guy can play at an all-star level. So I do understand that perspective of getting a guy like Harden who's playing out of his mind, right? And I guess on paper now you technically have the best backcourt in the East, dare I say, in the entire league, but in Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. But I think there's still concerns, right? I think a playoff meltdown is probably going to happen. And who knows, what the matchup is going to be. But I don't think Harden is as big of an upgrade as people are saying. I like this a little bit better for the Clippers because they do get younger. But at the end of the day, for Cleveland, it's like, I don't know. I feel like you could have done better with this, or at least just stuck it out with Garland.
You know, I'm on and off on this trade as well. I think the Clippers won this trade easily. We talked about on this podcast already that the Clippers are old. Shout out to Yarby, called him the old pickup truck. And they decided they're gonna go a little bit younger. And the crazy thing is that the Clippers are still actually winning games. Like, I was watching them last night or a few nights ago. They absolutely destroyed the Minnesota Timberwolves with no problem, man. They're still a very talented team. Kawhi Leonard's playing, his best basketball. But for the Cavaliers, you know what I mean? Like, I'm against this trade, but Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, something had to give. Somebody had to go.
Mm-hmm.
That core just wasn't gonna cut it out together. And honestly, I thought it was gonna be Jared Allen.
Me too.
Uh, but
Yeah.
obviously didn't happen. And I think Jared Allen and Mobley are actually going to benefit from acquiring James Harden more than anything, because James Harden, he's a good passer, a good playmaker, makes life easier for him. And I was watching the Cavaliers versus the Nuggets last night, and where the Cavaliers were getting destroyed that whole game, and they made a big run. Donovan Mitchell hit game-winning free throws, and you could see that the James Harden and Donovan Mitchell effect has worked well, right? James Harden has put up 23 and 22, 7 assists, 8 assists, and Allen looks good. But then again, this is without Mobley, so that can change a little bit things. Even though I think they're still going to play well, but and then we're forgetting about the other additions they make. It's not always good to go desperate, right? Like when you look at Milwaukee, you could tell like they went all in for that one championship, and now they're just in a it's bad over there in Milwaukee right now. You know what I mean? Like their best player is Ryan Rollins. But some organizations like, hey, we won a championship and that's all we want. But some organizations are like, hey, we want to be competitive like the Miami Heat. They may not win it, but they always want to be competitive every single year. You know what I mean? Or like a football example, the Cowboys, they're always going to be competitive.
Oh my God.
They're never going to win it, but they want to be competitive. And I like some organizations are like that and some are not. I don't know why Yarby's saying I don't know because oh my God, because I'm not saying anything that's bad. I'm just saying the truth. Cowboys, the NBA teams are always going to be competitive. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but they're always going to stay competitive. There's some teams like the Wizards who are never competitive. So we'll see. But overall, though, I'm looking forward to see Garland play for the Clippers, though, right? Like I think Garland is going to prove a lot of people wrong.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at the Cavs, right? Because they were the team that had to give up the second round picks, right, in order to get Harden, where you would almost think it would maybe be the other way around. But it also kind of suggests that Garland's value across the league probably wasn't quite that high, right? Because I remember maybe even a year or so ago when we were talking about the possibility of Cleveland trading Garland, right? Because it was reporting about like if Mitchell signs an extension, then he might go up to Cleveland and ask for a trade. So he probably isn't too upset or disappointed about him going to a different team where he'll be the point guard. He'll get to have the ball in his hands. Well, I guess he'll have to share it with Kawhi, but like still, they can find ways to make that work.
Yeah.
So I am curious about that. Like you mentioned, Harden's a really good passer, so you can work with the bigs on everything. It's just, and then you combine that with the other moves they made, right? Because they also swapped out DeAndre Hunter, swapped out Lonzo Ball, brought in Dennis Schroeder, and then brought in Keon Ellis as well, right? So now they've kind of loaded up on guards, but guards that are probably better than the ones that they had before, right? At least, Schroeder and Ellis, right? That's an upgrade over Lonzo Ball. I like Craig Porter Jr., but because he hasn't played a whole lot in the postseason, we have to see what that looks like too. So I don't, like you said, it feels kind of like a desperate Cleveland move. This probably wouldn't be done with the previous CBA, but because they're in the second apron, they had to do something, and they probably just last year probably kind of broke them, right? Because the last year was a real shot, to be able to make a run, potentially compete against Oklahoma City. They did get hurt, so you have to factor that in as well. But injuries happen, and even at full strength, right? What would it have looked like if they had gone that far? But now that Mobley won Defensive Player of the Year, now he's making $50+ million. So you got to get the best version of him out there. So we'll see what it looks like. I don't, like you said, it's hard to feel amazing about it, but at the same time, like, I understand why Cleveland did it. That's kind of really the only thing I can really ask for. And then, like you mentioned, for the Clippers, obviously they didn't just make one move; they made another move where they traded Zubac, right, to the Indiana Pacers, right, and they basically got back Benedict Mathurin, got back 2 first-round picks, one of which is this year's Pacers first, but it's protected. It's protected 1 through 4 and then 10 through 29, right? So pretty much, if it lands between 5 and 9, it goes to the Clippers. So there's a chance that they could get, a 5 to 9 pick in the first round of the draft, which this is supposed to be a really good draft. I know most of the top guys are like 1 to 4, but still, that's better than not having a first round pick at all, right? For a team that looks like they're probably going in a different direction, right? And the Pacers would fall under the category of, which we can get into, teams that are in the lottery right now this year, but are going to be loading up, right? So we talked about the Pacers. Got a couple other teams to talk about. Talk
Hey,
about Utah first.
I got you. Yo,
Yeah,
Chris, let me say something real quick.
sure.
Cleveland's record last year is better, but I honestly think they're better this year, even like outside of the Harden trade.
Okay.
Jalen Tyson has emerged as a very good player.
Yeah, they
Last
thought they're
year,
expendable.
yeah, Jalen Tyson, like no one even knew about Jalen Tyson. You know what I mean? And now he turned into a player that is going to get paid a lot of money if it's in Cleveland or elsewhere. You know what I mean? And so I think that right there, with Ty Jerome being unplayable in the postseason as well, with no defense, with offense, I do think they do have a better roster than
Sure.
last year.
Yeah, and you factor in the Eastern Conference, right? Like, could there be a chance to maybe this year make a run in the Eastern Conference compared to last year? But last year they're the best record in the Eastern Conference, right? They don't this year. We'll see where they end up, but there's a case to be made for it. I just need to see it. I need to see it come playoff time because we've seen this with Harden before. But like I said, the case that I can make is if he has a stinky game, you got Mitchell to make up for it. And then hopefully, worst case scenario, he can set up the bigs. Can you survive a bad game with him? If it's not game 7, maybe you could. But we'll have to see. But now, like I said, back to the lottery teams, those are the teams, like I said, other than Cleveland, that made the biggest splashes, right? Because we also had, I already mentioned the Pacers, right? Clearly loading up for next year. So they're gambling on the idea of there's a chance that we could get Zubac with a top pick in the draft. But if we don't, we still get Zubac, which is still really good, and we still have a lot of other returning players from a team that was 1 game away from making the NBA Finals, right? We know what Zubac is. He was one of the best centers in the league last year. Hadn't been quite as good this year. Also had been hurt, right? But I think he'll do just fine in Indiana, right? He'll be replacing Turner, not a stretch 5, right? But super devastating around the basket, right? Plays slower than Turner, but I think it could add a little bit more variety maybe to the Pacers offense just because now you can dump the ball to a guy in the post, right? You can play in the pick and roll. Zubac is also a really good defender around the rim, shot blocker as well. So I got no issues with it for Indiana. What do you guys think about that move?
I'm gonna zag. I don't really like it for Indiana. I mean, like
Okay.
I do, but I don't at the same time because I think the pick. I think they should have held on to that pick. I'm gonna be honest. Like, and I
Okay.
know it has the protection or whatever, but from what I've seen with the new lottery system and lottery odds, I don't think it's going to swing in their favor. I think that pick is probably going to go to the Clippers, but we'll
They
see.
have to finish with the worst record to have an almost guaranteed shot to keep it.
Exactly. And do I think that that's going to happen? It could potentially, but
Yeah.
you know,
They
as
have the
we get
second worst record right now.
yeah, and as we get closer and closer to the end of the season, you know, teams are going to blatantly tank, you know, off rip. So, we'll see what happens there, but I do like Zubac going there. I think it's a different look for Indiana, right? Like you said, they're probably not going to be able to play, you know, as fast as they were able to with Miles Turner, and that's okay. But at the same time, Indiana might be a little bit full of themselves. I don't know because, you know, granted they did make the conference finals the year before and then the finals last year. But at the same time, are they going to be a good team next year? Is that guaranteed? Is that locked in? Right? I don't know how I feel
Yeah.
about that.
They got to be healthy.
Yeah, and say you do miss out on that pick. I mean, I don't know how I feel about it, respectfully, but we'll kind of have to see, I guess. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think the Pacers are gambling as well. You know, this is the only season that you think the Pacers are ever going to be this bad for a while. So you had the opportunity to lend a generation talent, but I also understand why they did it. They're going to always need a big no matter what, even if they did land a top pick in this year's class, right? Like Miles Turner's gone. There's nobody on that roster that was going to be a starting center for a long, long time. And Zubac does bring that. So I do get that. They are going to play a little bit slower, but like I said, they're banking on what they did, you know, game and a couple seasons ago against Oklahoma City Thunder in the finals and stuff like that with a healthy squad of Tyrese, Demhart, Neesmith, Siakam, and Zoo. And then obviously you still got TJ McConnell coming off the bench, Obi Toppin, Walker. Like they still have the same team. They're just don't got Tyrese Halliburton. And it's crazy. No one talks about this, but it just shows you how valuable Tyrese is. A lot of people gave him hate, but without him, they're the worst team in the league. So, you know, I'm looking forward to see what happens next year because I think a lot of teams will be healthier. I think there will be some more trades in the offseason. The East will definitely get a little bit better. You got the Wizards, obviously, but you know, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to see what Big Zoo brings. But Pacers are another team that's actively tanking. They pretty much say, listen, he's probably not going to play for a while. You know, they're resting him due to this ankle injury. Okay, buddy. But the other thing I don't think we brought up though, they can still get the top pick, and if they do get the top pick with Zubats, then they won this trade, or you know
100%.
they. So you know what I mean, and so that's the thing, they could still get that, and he could still be a developable piece as they still compete for a championship, and you still got a future with your top guy.
Yeah, and that's my point when I said like if they finish with the worst record, then I think the worst they can get is 5, right? And the pick is what 1 through 4.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a chance that like if you finish with the worst record, you have a 13% chance, I guess, of keeping the pick, but you won't drop past 5. So that means you could be 1 to 4. I think the Kings have the worst record in the league right now, right? They're 12-43. Pacers are 13-40, so they're not too far behind. So, like we said, there's going to be some generational tanking. Let's talk about some other lottery teams that made some moves. Utah Jazz traded for Jaren Jackson Jr. The funny theme about this deadline was there were so many moves that had no reporting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even going to say little to no reporting. No reporting.
Yeah.
I know that people talked about the idea that Memphis could trade Jaren Jackson Jr., right? I know there was some thought about like they could move Ja, and if they move Ja, they could also move Triple J. But even then, it was like, oh, Boston inquired about Jaren Jackson Jr., right? Or something like that. I think after the deadline, right, there's always the reporting of like, oh, a team like Golden State inquired about Triple J. But nobody said anything about Jaren Jackson Jr. going to the Utah Jazz. Like that had no reporting whatsoever, right? And that one was a little bit different in the sense of like in that trade, right? So what did Utah do? Right? They basically ended up trading 3 first-round picks to Memphis, along with Walter Clayton Jr., Kyle Anderson, Taylor Hendricks, and Georges Niang. And then I believe Utah also got back Jock Landale, who they flipped to Atlanta. They got back Conchar and Vince Williams. I don't know. This one is weird. This one is weird. Like it just only in the sense of I didn't expect it at all. Utah, clearly they're looking at it from the angle of we're going to try to quote unquote compete next year, right? Because you're getting a big that can fit next to, you're getting a big that can play with Kessler and Markkinen, right? Because Jaren Jackson Jr., he played with other centers in Memphis, right? He played next to Adams, played next to Edey. Because you don't really want him to be your full-time center because rebounding isn't really his thing. We know that. But he can play next to another center, even though rim protection's supposed to be his big thing. But either way, he can shoot threes. So they're going for a giant lineup, right? Where they also clearly believe in Keontae George, right? Who's had a major standout season, right? Where he's had a great year, averaging almost 25 a game. Clearly, like patching up a lot of the holes in his game right now. He gets to the free throw line, much better finisher around the basket. I guess Ace Bailey will play the two. So who's the guy that's going around guarding the other team's guards? I don't know. But everybody's loading up for bigs. The only thing if you're Memphis is that the first that you got back. So you got three firsts. You got a Jazz first. That's the most favorable between Utah, Cleveland, and Minnesota. So I guess probably Utah in 2027. You got the Lakers 2027 first. I believe that came from the Russ deal. And then the Phoenix Suns 2031 first, right? I think that came from that trade that Phoenix made last year, right? Where they took their first and then split it up into multiple firsts.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how good any of those first round picks will be if you're Memphis. But I guess if you're Memphis, you're basically in the tank, going through a rebuild. We'll see what happens with Ja. It was just weird. Like I said, I don't necessarily hate it. But I guess if you're Utah, it's another team that doesn't normally get free agents to come there, for different reasons. So if you're gonna go out and get a guy, you got to trade for them. So you trade for Jaren Jackson Jr. He's gonna be making $50 million. Markkinen's gonna be making $50 million, and then you'll probably have to pay whatever you have to pay Keontae George and Kessler because I think they'll bring Kessler back for sure. And I don't mind it. Like I said, it was weird. I don't mean it as in weird as in I hate it. It's just like now, Utah next year is going to come into the party and they're going to try to compete for a spot in the play-in, right, and take the next step forward. Like I said, in terms of all these lottery teams, like that was kind of the theme where they're trading for these guys. They're going to throw away this year, get a top pick, bring these guys in next year, and then check ball. So it's similar to the identity that Utah tried to do the last couple of seasons, right? But instead of John Collins, it's Jaren Jackson Jr. It's an upgrade, I would say.
Yeah.
So don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that we're recording this video a little bit later, right, than everybody else. Like, I know y'all did the deadline stream, and shout out to y'all for holding it down, right? But because initially I hated this freaking move. I was
Right.
like, what is going on? Why would either of these teams do that? And then I thought, oh well, if Memphis is getting rid of Jaren, that means Ja's gone. No, they kept Ja, but I love this for Utah now. I give it an A+. I'm going to be so honest, right? And it all goes back to something that I said initially in the draft because I remember when we talked about Ace Bailey going to Utah, I was like, put him at the 2. There's no need for him to be a wing. And I think that's going to help his development. It's going to help Keontae for sure. You're going to surround these guys with a bunch of, outside shooting. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. can, add that because I don't know what they're going to do with Kessler because I feel like his three-point shot is probably never going to truly develop. So I guess that is the thought process of bringing a guy like Triple J who can be one of the best help defenders, in the league, right, alongside another great defender in Walker Kessler. And then we already know what Markkinen can do when he stretches the floor on the offensive end. Paired with Keontae and freaking Ace Billy, I love it for the future. I don't love it right now, obviously, because sitting guys, but next year, I think they're going to be a pretty competitive team if, all those guys take a leap and Triple J, can just be a great help defender.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I like it. I like it as well. You kind of already seen a glimpse of it recently with Laurie and Jackson playing together. But not only that, Nurkic. I think a lot of people aren't giving Nurkic his credit, but Nurkic is having a career season this year in Utah. Bro's putting up triple doubles like it's nothing, and he's playing actually impactful basketball. He's making like $19 million, I believe. He is a free agent, so it'll be interesting to see if they do bring him back as a backup big when everybody's healthy, or they just let him walk, or whatever the case may be. They got to figure out the George and Walker Kessler situation contract. But nowadays, man, the NBA is no longer small ball. It's having two legit centers on your team, and That's what Utah's going with. I always bring up the San Antonio Spurs, man. Like Luke Cornett and Wemby's situation is awesome. You could still put Wemby at the 5 at times. He is a little bit, on lighter frame, but you can still do it, right? Like you can do the same thing with Utah playing small ball in a sense, putting Jackson at the 5 or 4 with Lauri Markkanen, or you can just go really tall and throw your 3 7-footers out there, right? Defensively, I'm interested to see how it works, but I think the reason why they did this move is because they realized they have a star shooting guard in Keontae George. I don't think they make this move if he doesn't develop into what he's doing this year. And that's why, if you notice, they're kind of letting him not play as much. He dealt with injury. Okay, let's kind of milk this injury as well, because he's only going to help out this team. And with them doing that, I'm against it. But with them doing that, they're finding out if they have other young talent. And honestly, Isaiah Collier has been coming around. He has been looking very, very good. Lately, like there was a stretch where like this dude was playing like 48 minutes in back-to-back games. Yeah, back-to-back against the Pacers and Hawks. That's unlikely. Like that's crazy. Like to play 48 minutes, never get out in back-to-back games. In both of those games, he had 22 assists and 11 assists, 25 points and 17 points. So, he has been very effective as well. So, you're building something in Utah that's special. I need to see something from Ace, because this is the time where he needs to play a little bit better, to see what they got from him. Because like the draft class, everybody's just outshining him. Con Kneppel is going to break the 3-point rookie record. I think Edgecombe has been slumping a little bit, but we already seen how good he can be. Cooper Flagg has been amazing. He's playing so well. They got their guy, you know what I mean? And so, and the list continues to go on. So, Ace Bailey's that option right now where, he already had some funky situations coming into the draft where he didn't want to be drafted to certain teams. So we'll see what happens so far with this Utah Jazz team. I'm actually very upset because Bryce Sensabaugh didn't understand to not beat my Miami Heat team, and it's just so pathetic, bro. That's a terrible loss, bro.
Yeah, and then that's a good point about Collier, right? Where, like he's still not shooting threes well, right? But just in terms of 2-point percentage, right? Almost 60% on twos, right? So inside the 3-point line, it's pretty much an automatic score. And also they gave up on the other guys that they drafted, right? Like what? Like Hendricks, right? Like that didn't really work out too well, right? How's that working out for you? Not really all that great.
Right.
So
Walter
you'd
Clayton
rather have
Jr.
Jaren Jackson.
too.
You
They
say,
got
yeah,
rid of
Clayton
him,
Jr.
yeah.
Yeah, right. So yeah, you'd rather have Triple J, and that gives you the opportunity now to continue to go. Hopefully, Cody Williams comes along, because there was a stretch where he was kind of the tank commander, but he was playing relatively well in the minutes he was getting. I don't know how that's going to work from here on out, but he'll probably get a lot of opportunities because, like Top Knot said, right, like Utah has these games where like we'll see glimpses of the front court. Or at least, well, Kessler hasn't played because he's not playing this year, but, we get to see Markkanen and Jackson together. And then in the second halves, right, they just send the guys to the bench and then just, go from there.
Which,
So,
believe it or
yeah.
not, Nurkic isn't as great as a defender, but it does give you how it's going to work out with Kessler. Because, like, offensively, they're kind of the same player. Like, even though Nurkic has been working on his shot, they're similar in some senses to me. So maybe they're just seeing how that works. But it's funny, though, because, like, Utah is getting, like, Kevin Love playing time, and he's actually playing well. Like, the minutes he plays, he's playing well. And they also gave up on Walter Clayton Jr. By the way, they traded him pretty quick. I was pretty high on him. But yeah, I mean, good for Utah, man. We finally got the younger teams to be a little bit competitive, man, right? Like the NBA will get stale if it's the same team, same team, same team, same teams. And I think with the NBA, you got the Charlotte coming in special, right? Toronto been playing well. The Pistons, the list continues to go on with the San Antonio Spurs, the Thunder, you know what I mean? So I think it's a good look.
Yeah, and then another lottery team made another huge splash, Washington Wizards, right? They ended up trading for Anthony Davis, right? Actually, right, by the end of the trade deadline, you brought in two guys. You brought in Trae Young and you brought in Anthony Davis, right? Obviously, good haul, good return there. And the nice thing about that is and I'll let you kind of, Yarby lead the conversation since that's your team. But the main nice thing is that, you got two stars, right? Where at their best, they're not probably going to get in the way of the young guys you have on your team. And at least in the case of AD, a little bit more so than Trey, right? Like worst case scenario, well, not bad, but like say he plays great, there's a world where like you could flip him to another contender and you could get some really good pieces back, maybe, right? Future picks or whatever, or you can keep him and continue to build, out with your young core. So this was probably my favorite trade of the deadline, right? Just in terms of like, AD is one of my guys. So I was glad that he was able to kind of get out of Dallas and get that situation behind him. But I want you to kind of take the charge, of this trade and kind of talk about what you thought about it.
Bro, this is a beautiful move, and it came out of absolutely nowhere. Nobody expected
Right.
Chris Middleton to be traded, to Dallas for freaking Anthony Davis. Like that was a complete bombshell, and I think it's equally as good for Washington as it is for Dallas, right? Because like you said, AD is no longer there, and we already know that relationship was not really good. The fans literally hated him. And you can get, the Luka stain kind of out of the air, and you clear up all that cap space because Middleton's an expiring deal, and that's the value that these expiring contracts have at the end of the day. Um, but in terms of fit for the Wizards, it's beautiful, right? We already know that he's not going to play a single game this season, but next season is what matters, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the pairing of a lot of these guys and the young core for the Wizards is probably the thing that I'm the most excited about, right? Because I think a lot of people before this move weren't really hip to what was going on in Washington because obviously the team is so garbage, but they have a ton of young, promising players like Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly, obviously Trey Johnson, right? And like you said, AD does not get in the way of any of those guys. And shout out to Alex Sarr as well because that front court I think is going to be scary defensively. I don't even care about the offense realistically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Defensively is what I'm kind of hype about in terms of pairing Alex Sarr and AD, and I think they're interchangeable at the 4 and 5. It's honestly going to depend on the matchup. And then you throw Trey Young into the mix as well. Like that's perfect. That's a guy who's going to set Anthony Davis up. There's not going to be a lot of pressure for him to be a focal point of the offense, right? It's going to be Trey. He's going to be handling the ball. He's going to be making you know everybody's job easier. And I'm just in utter disbelief that this was able to even happen because, like you said, it came out of freaking nowhere. And I obviously, I'm sure he didn't have a preferred destination, or at least Washington isn't the preferred destination. But I think there's a vision for this to work out. Um, I think they do need to work on depth a little bit, but yeah, this is not like the complete team, but it's a great start, right? To bring in two, I want to say Hall of Famers. I don't know if Trae Young's going to get into the Hall of Fame, but at least all NBA guys onto a roster that and onto a team that obviously does not really attract big time free agents. So this is a splash and a low risk, ultimate reward move from Washington.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, at first I didn't like this move, and then I looked at the picks because when the trade came out, I didn't know the picks yet, and I'm like, yo, this is gross, man. Why are they doing this? But the picks is what mattered in this, and they didn't give up nothing in their picks and stuff like that. So it's the same thing what Utah is doing, the same thing the Wizards are doing. Everybody's tanking to get this top lottery pick with the core that you already got. So I think it's gonna be beneficial for Keyshawn George, Trey Johnson, Sarr. Those are your big guys, Bilal. I just questioned Anthony Davis's comments. That threw me off the wrong way. Why he's saying that stuff? It's either here or somewhere else, bro. You just got traded, bro. You don't be saying those things, bro. Like, you know what I mean? But I think Trey's excited. I seen him post a picture of him and Anthony Davis play AAU together.
Mm-hmm.
He said like old times, man. So I'm looking forward to it, man. I think my concern with them is this injury concern on both of the guys, and you're gonna notice it a lot. Yarby, get ready.
Oh
Anthony
yeah.
Davis is gonna shoot the ball, fall on his elbow, go back to the locker room, questionable. Come back in 2 games, his toe hurts. Come back in 3 games, his eye hurts. This
Yeah.
is what AD is known for, man. Yeah, I don't know how LeBron dealt with it, but shout out to LeBron for dealing with that because that is frustrating. But yeah, man, looking forward to see how the Wizards play this year, man. Yarby finally has a team to watch that's actually going to be somewhat competitive and not be boring after every game. Getting blown out and stuff like that. Sometimes it's cool to watch the young guys, but sometimes you just want to go out there and compete. It's been a rough year for him. Both his teams in both sports been struggling really, really bad.
Yeah.
So hopefully next year things get a little bit better for Yarby over here.
Well, listen, health is going to be the thing that probably keeps the Wizards season, alive next year. Like you said, like it's no secret that Anthony Davis can't really stay on the floor, but I guess there is hope that he'll get the surgery this season and then be ready to go, by the start of the next season. So, hopefully that happens. And yeah, I think when healthy, I think this team could be a sleeper. I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah, and again, like you didn't give up anything of real substance.
And
That makes
no
a lot.
whiz kids were in the trade. I love it.
Right. Yeah, you didn't have to give up any young players, like he mentioned, like Top Notch mentioned, right? The picks, right? I think one of them was like a Warriors pick in 2030.
Yeah.
Then there was like another one where what was it? It was like a pick from Oklahoma City,
Yeah,
right?
we
Something
don't
like
care
that.
about those. Everybody thought it
Right.
was going to be the pick from 2026 draft, and it's like no, we would never do that.
No, no.
Like, what are you
That
talking
wasn't
about?
yeah, no, that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the nice part is that like I said, you got a couple of guys who won't get in the way, of the development of these players. Should ideally add to it. And let's say they're not healthy, you gave up nothing to get them, right? Worst case scenario, let's say they get hurt, you can get another top pick or something like that, right? So it's pretty. And like I said, there's also a world where you could flip one of those guys. You could flip AD, for stuff or whatever. So really, I don't see any real downside to
No.
it. And like I said, it falls into the category of all these lottery teams. Yeah, it's gonna stink the rest of this year, for those teams. But hopefully, everybody will get rewarded. They'll get those picks and then go into next year, with some good competitive teams, right? And then you ideally would only have maybe a few bad teams, right? Because there's always going to be a team that ends up being worse, because of injuries or whatever. But that was probably my favorite part of the deadline.
Me
Was
too.
just like all the lottery teams coming together and deciding, like, hey, we're tired of just being perpetually bad every year and just hoping and banking on the draft, because the draft may not save you, right? Because you could be bad all you want. Because we talked about it before we got on. You could be bad all you want. You're not guaranteed to get the number one pick.
Look at
That's never
last
really
year.
been the case
Look at
in
last
the
year for the
NBA.
Wizards, bro. It was
Right,
terrible
exactly,
for them.
right? Detroit had the worst record in the draft, and they dropped to 5, right? And they didn't get Wemby. They got a Sora Thompson, who's still good, but like they managed to kind of deal with that fine, right? Because Detroit's really good. I mean, still rather have Wemby, but either way, if you have a good organization, you can find a way, right? And we talked about it way back, right? When the Wizards and some of these other teams have changed their front offices, right? Where it's not the same type of people that were running these teams in the past, right? Like a lot of these teams outside of, well, Sacramento, I guess, got a new GM, but like just in general, right? Like a lot of these other teams, like the Wizards and others, right? They have new front offices where it's not the same garbage from before, where like they're gonna make better decisions. They're going to make more informed decisions, and that's what we're seeing right now with those teams. And that's all you can really ask for, right? Like you just want a chance for your team to be good. Give your team something to root for. If you're any of these lottery teams, and these guys' values must have just been relatively low, because just a guy like a Jaren Jackson Jr. I know he's kind of like a polarizing player, but like just in general, like what Utah gave up to get him, you would have thought that he would have gone for a little bit more. AD, just because of the age, you may not have thought it would have been much, but like, he was in a trade for Luka Doncic, right? So like, when you knew you weren't getting back a return like that, but just in general, it was just kind of interesting to see that, from those teams. After that, right, there were some contenders, right, that made, kind of some under the radar moves, right? So we can mention those, right? Oklahoma City ended up trading for Jared McCain, right? Obviously, this was kind of a guy to watch out for, because once Philly drafted VJ Edgecombe, you kind of figured, okay, there's probably a decent chance that, one of those other guards, whether it's Grimes or McCain or somebody like that, ends up getting moved. And it was McCain that was the odd man out. So now he goes to Oklahoma City, goes to a team that's got a lot of great defensive talent, but there are some nights where offensively it's a struggle, right? Where like everybody on the team just forgets how to shoot threes. And obviously on a night where now SGA is going to be out for a minute, right? On a night where you don't have SGA, J-Dub just came back, right? You do need some offensive firepower. So he could be a guy that can get hot. He was probably the favorite to win Rookie of the Year last year before he tore his meniscus, right? And then obviously he had the thumb injury, just started kind of coming back and playing well. But Philly, obviously, we figured that they would probably do something to get under the tax. I know that the Paul George suspension helped, but they were going to move a guy, and it ended up being McCain. And so now he's got a new opportunity in Oklahoma City. And he's going to compete for minutes, right? Because, you have AJ Mitchell, who's been out, who will probably be ahead of him in the pecking order, right? Topic is expected to come back at some point, right, from his chemotherapy. So you got that as well. So we like his game. I mean, he's a really good offensive player, skilled offensive player. So I like this for Oklahoma City, just to have a potential guy you could just bring in off the bench, who you could just put in for a quarter, and he could score like 10 straight points, in a game where you need a little bit of offense. In worst case scenario, let's say he doesn't play a whole lot. What did you really give up? I mean, they gave up like a Rockets first round pick, right? And they're going to be a playoff team, so it's not going to be a crazy high pick. And then 3 future seconds. So like it for Oklahoma City. I think it's really good.
Yeah, I love it for Oklahoma City. This is, such a low risk, high reward move. I think, you get a bona fide knockdown spark plug, right? That's essentially what it is. It's another Isaiah Joe at this point. And that's exactly what this team needs, right? They need consistent shooting, and that's what Jared McCain's going to bring you. And he's going to give you energy, right? And he fits the vibe of the team as well, right? So I think it's an A+ move from the Thunder. And, who knows? Like, say his development just skyrockets, he could be, the sixth man that you really needed.
Yo, I just witnessed Kawhi Leonard break Tari Eason's ankles. That is terrible. Listen, Jared McCain would never be like that. Anyways, though,
what is the core? There's no way we just compared Kawhi to freaking Jared McCain. But okay.
Listen. You'll see why I say that after. I think the 76ers are a terrible organization for giving up on a player that was going to win the Rookie of the Year conversations win the Rookie of the Year before he got injured. You don't give up on a player like that. And then, the injury that he had was gruesome. And then he comes back this year before, media day, gets injured again. Injuries are going to slow down people. So the fact that they decided, we felt like we won this trade because we got some picks out of it, it's just awful management, man. Because like when you look at their bench unit, it's already not good. Quentin Grimes hasn't necessarily been great this year. They got old, washed up Kyle Lowry. They traded Eric Gordon. I mean, dude, and Eric Gordon is horrible as well. So it's just like I don't know what they thought this was going to be. Especially with, Paul George getting suspended. Joel Embiid, never doesn't know when he's going to play or when he's not. You need the depth. You need these young guys. And even with the addition of VJ Edgecombe, I understand. But he still can come off the bench and still play well for you. So you got the rich richer in the Oklahoma City Thunder because he's going to develop over there very, very well. He fits the culture. He fits the little TikTok crew over there with J-Dub, always doing these dances and stuff, and Shea. He fits perfect. So, got to give a lot of credit to Sam Presti. And honestly, the Oklahoma City Thunder, we've been telling them to trade picks. They got to at this point. Like they're, trade these picks. Trade these picks. Like, let's get some value out of them. And they got Jared McCain, which is just crazy to say because, like, if he does hit his full potential, it's going to get scary. They already have AJ Mitchell, McCain. We haven't seen anything from Topic yet, but I mean, he was a top lot. He was supposed to be really, really good. Unfortunately, he dealt with the stuff that he had. He was. So we'll see. I think this is a hot take, but I think, and he just got paid, but I do think J-Dub will be out of there sooner than later, and McCain will replace him.
Wow, I can't believe I just heard that. But okay.
So,
so y'all saying wow, but OKC has not played well with him this year. He hasn't. They played better without him.
They're not going to move him.
Okay.
Yeah, so and that's the thing with Oklahoma City. I did not know whether or not they were going to make a trade because, they could have just made the case of, well, we're good as is. We just got to get healthy because they've been injured all year, right? Like, I mean, I know you mentioned J-Dub, they haven't won. a lot with him, but he's barely played, right? I mean, has he played more than 10 games this year? It's not a lot because he just came back. Yeah, he's all right. So he's played more than I thought, 25 games, but that's still 25 out of, more than halfway through the season. They're what, 41 and 13. So he's missed basically 30 games, right? That's a lot of time where we have not seen them at their full strength. So I'm glad that they made a trade because, like Top Knot said, like you can't just keep and hoard all these picks. You're gonna have to move them for something. And I like the idea that they at least address the idea of like we do have a problem where we do need probably a little bit of additional creation, behind our two guys, our two stars, right, our two starters, our two ball handlers. Because after that, then it's kind of like you know, Chet Holmgren with the ball in his hands, which is, fine, but he's a big man, right? Hardenstein with the 5-out offense with the handoffs. You just probably need another ball handler decision maker. And you got to give Topic time, right? Because he may not come back right away, right? And then obviously Mitchell is also out too. And he can play with any of the guards, right? Because he's got size. He can play off the ball too. So, like I said, no issues with that. Other, another contender that made a move, the Minnesota Timberwolves, traded for Io DeSumo, right? They also ended up bringing back Mike Conley, right? Because they ended up moving him right with to what, Charlotte or Chicago, and then the Bulls have no idea what they're doing. But in terms of Io DeSumo, they gave up on Dillingham, gave up 4 second-round picks. Dillingham, it's a tough story. It's a tough situation, man.
Bro, scrub.
He was drafted to be kind of like their next point guard after Conley. Didn't really work out all that great. So, we'll see what happens in Chicago if he even plays, considering they have a million other guards. But this is more about DeSumo, right? Which I'm kind of surprised that the Bulls traded, I guess, a little bit. Just because, since they moved Kobe White, I kind of just assumed, okay, you can keep DeSumo with Giddy or whatever. Um, and then they have all these second round picks. But for the Wolves, you got another bench guy. You lost Nickeil Alexander Walker. Your bench, other than Naz Reid, you're kind of hoping and praying that Bones Highland is good, which he's been good. He's been a reclamation project for them. But you needed another bench guy because if you're going to go into the playoffs and it's your starting 5 with no point guard, and then it's Mike Conley as your backup, and then Naz Reid off the bench, it's not a great feeling, right? It's kind of also, I guess, a semi-acknowledgement that the young guys that they had probably weren't really quite ready, right? Because obviously Dillingham wasn't, but even the other guys, right? Like Shannon Jr. hasn't done a whole lot this year. I think he's been hurt. Clark's okay, but it's more so, the other guys, they're like Ant and McDaniels have progressed. They've played really well. So it just makes them deeper, right? So it should, given the West, it should probably move them up in the Western Conference rankings. They have a lot of weird regular season games at times, but we know in the playoffs, they've generally been better, I think, than expected. Although the conference finals appearances weren't all that amazing in terms of how they performed in those. But like this is one where it's like they were in the Giannis sweepstakes. We didn't even mention Giannis at all, by the way, right? What a funny situation that was. We could have easily tried to troll everybody and say that Giannis was traded and then just said, nope, never mind, he wasn't, because he wasn't. But either way, this didn't get in the way of that. So this at least helps them out for this year, right? This is one of those contender moves where no issues with it. He can play both ends of the floor. And like I said, just I guess I mean Alexander Walker's better, but you couldn't have kept him and Naz Reid together. So this is a nice consolation prize. And then, like I said, they brought Conley back because he got traded and then got bought out and came again. Because I think once you get moved twice, you can go back to the team that previously traded you, right? If he had just been traded once and gotten bought out, he couldn't go back. So I guess they brought him back. Yay. See how he survives in the postseason. But I like that for Minnesota.
Yeah, I think it's one of the more underrated moves. We already know what he brings on both ends of the floor. He's knocked down, super efficient, and can definitely help them on the defensive side as well. So it doesn't really shake up their whole identity, right? So ain't much to say here, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's played well since the last few games. I do think Minnesota has a problem because they have inconsistencies when it comes to defense. Compared to last year, they were better defensively. This year, they don't show as much effort. Their bench isn't as deep. Their rotations are pretty bad. I think that's just due to roster construction. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Minnesota this year.
Yeah.
For sure. That's my team coming out the West.
Yeah, and then after that, We also had the Knicks grabbing Jose Alvarado, like that one. What did you guys think of the Boston Vucevic one? Because that was one that I didn't really expect, at all. Because I know Boston was a team that was trying to trade for Zubac. Personally, for me, I don't think it's the ideal center that I would have grabbed if I was Boston. I don't like it as much. I mean, again, you just had Kata. Vucevic, he is a stretch five. And with the way Boston plays offensively, they're not a very fast-paced team. Chicago likes to play fast, so that doesn't really match up with Vucevic. But in Boston, like I said, because of the slower pace, that could help. But he's older, right? Not like a great defensive big. And they brought him off the bench initially. I'm curious to see if he ends up being the starter. And then obviously they moved Simons. And I guess if you ask me, like in the summer, like, all right, you flip Drew Holiday for Simons, and then you flip Simons for Vucevic. Are you cool with that? I I don't know. I mean, I like I said, I think Vucevic is okay, but I don't know. I just kind of wish that it was somebody a little bit more defensive minded. Like I said, I would have liked Zubac, but they weren't beating the Indiana deal, so they basically said, all right, we'll just take the quote unquote next best guy, and kind of go for there. But then obviously, I guess whenever Tatum comes back, because it sounds like he's getting ready to come back, inching towards coming back, doing some 5-on-5s, right? Could you then, I guess, kind of combine those guys with Vucevic together? Then you can protect him with those athletic wings, Derek White as well. That's something that I'd like to see. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not like a huge. Vucevic, I'm okay with. I think he's okay, but I don't know. I didn't like it as much for Boston personally. But I guess if you're Chicago, then you needed to move off of Vucevic because what do you need him for at this point?
Yeah, this is fine to me. I don't really have a
Yeah,
problem with it. I think, as long as he can give you a cool little, I don't know, 12 and 10, right, on efficient numbers, I think I'm cool with that, right? And he wasn't even bad in Chicago. Um,
right.
like the numbers were actually pretty good. So, um, it's just I'm happy to see him away from Chicago because,
Yeah.
I think he,
What's the point?
yeah, exactly. He overstayed his welcome there for sure.
No, I actually like this move, man. This is, one of the better head coaches. He can make anything work. Coming into the year, we didn't expect Boston to be this good.
Mm-hmm.
They rolled with Garza and Cada throughout the year, and they're still a top three team. Better than all our teams combined on this panel. So, I think Vooch, he finally joins a contender. Bro hasn't been on a contender in however long. And so
Since
I
the Bulls
think,
were good, I guess.
yeah, I mean, I think they bring something out of him different. I think it'll be more of his playmaking ability. That'll be used more here than in Chicago.
Yeah. What did we think of the Bulls' moves in general? Because there was a lot of just kind of weirdness from them, right? Where so obviously they swapped Vucevic for Simons, right? Then they also traded Kobe White, got back Colin Sexton, right? Then also they did the deal with the Pistons, right, where they brought in Jaden Ivey as well for Kevin Herter, and then they got a bunch of second round picks back, which you can't hate on second round picks. You could use those, to sweeten the pot and get some type of bench guy or whatever. Uh, Bulls, you're not at that point yet, but I guess it's okay to have them because you could potentially talk another team into maybe taking those for whatever, right? But you do have a lot of guards. For what reason? I don't know. I mean, I guess they're trying to make a push for the play-in, sort of, but are they? I don't know. It's hard to figure out what the Bulls do on a daily basis because now you have what you have already have Giddy, and then what 6, 7 other guards out there. So I'm curious to see how that looks. But to be fair, a bunch of those guys are expirings, so I guess it's not the worst case scenario, right? You could probably figure stuff out in the offseason. It's just kind of a shame because it feels like so many of the Bulls players that they had when the team was good, by the time they ended up moving on from all of them, they got like next to nothing back for any of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I guess Caruso, you got back Giddy, which I guess is cool. Yay for that. But then it's like DeRozan, you got back nothing. You got the expiring contract of Simons for Vucevic. Lonzo Ball, I mean, they didn't get anything out of him, which they weren't going to. But that's just kind of wild, right? Like I guess Patrick Williams is the remnant of that team, and they're probably stuck with him with the contract he's got. So, but what do you guys think of what they did? like from a Bulls perspective, because some of the other deals that we talked about was from the perspective of the other teams. I couldn't really figure it out.
Too little, too late, in my opinion. I think like you said, they held on to Vucevic too long, right? So that was done. The Kobe White thing, I kind of would have preferred him to go elsewhere, but
Yeah.
and I think you could have gotten better or more. But Colin Sexton is okay. It's just I don't really know what he does for the team as a whole, and that's the problem,
Mhm.
right? They don't have the guy. Like I don't want to really build a team around Giddy, right? I don't really want to build a team around Buzelis. So they kind of have to get their guy,
Right.
and then we can, kind of have a conversation about them. So for me, it's just a hodgepodge of nothing. Like it really did nothing for me, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Terrible trade, terrible management, terrible front office.
Bingo.
Destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an example of not great ownership and
Terrible, bro.
decision making. Yeah. Do we like it from Charlotte's perspective? Because like Top Notch mentioned, like they've been playing really well. You bring in more guard depth. I guess you basically swap Sexton with Kobe White, right? Who I think most people would say is better.
By far.
Um, Kobe White, I think he's in the last year of his deal, so I'm curious to see, would he stay? Could he be, a quote unquote LaMelo replacement, or could he just play alongside LaMelo Ball and be a backup guard? Like Yarby said, I would have preferred him to be moved to like a contending-ish type of
That's
team
my point.
personally, and that's kind of what I thought was going to happen,
Yep.
but then it didn't happen. But I
Yep.
don't mind him in Charlotte because Charlotte, I guess we kind of didn't really expect them to do much of anything, but they actually did. But they didn't do anything crazy, right? They did a move that I think you got an upgrade, and if he doesn't help you, he's an expiring contract, or you could bring him back. So that's the type of move that if Charlotte's going to make, got no problems with it whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we had the Warriors. The Kuminga saga is over. It's done. It's no more. No more Kuminga in Golden State anymore. Instead, the unicorn comes to the Bay. Didn't really expect that at all. Kuminga and Buddy Hield to the Hawks for Kristaps Porzingis, right? Or whatever's left of him. So this is a guy where
That
um,
was so real, bro. Like, oh my
yeah,
god.
I mean, this season, his stats when he's played, 17 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 46 from the field, 36 from three. Last year in Boston, he averaged 20 and 7. Problem is, 42 games last year, 17 games this year, only 24 minutes a game this year. And it's now not just injury that you have to deal with him, it's also an illness that doesn't really seem like that there's really a real answer for it, where it's not going to be a problem because it could pop up at any time, where if it happens, he could miss some games here or there. It's more so the Warriors kind of just dumping Kaminga. I didn't really expect them to get back a great return, honestly. I mean, if you had asked me, I would have thought they probably would have gotten a player worse than Porzingis. But there's also a reason why he was available, where they didn't have to give up any picks. He's an expiring contract, so I guess that gives you more optionality in the summer if you're the Warriors. And you got rid of Kaminga. Um, it would have been cool if Butler hadn't have gotten hurt, and then you could say, all right, if you have a healthy Porzingis, with Steph and Draymond and Jimmy and all those other guys, like, that would be kind of cool. But with Butler being out, it's kind of just, all right, let's see what this looks like. Because I guess as a center, if he's healthy, he's better than what they have. But him being healthy, I just don't think is a thing at this point, right? I like it would be more surprising to me if he played like 10 straight games.
Yeah. I'm gonna be real. I freaking hate this deal. I think this is one of the worst deals of the deadline. For both sides, right? I think Atlanta, you get Kaminga, right? Who's a player that I'm not even remotely high on anymore. I was when he first got drafted because I was like, top 1% athlete. Already know what that can translate to if you put your mind to it. Yeah, well, I don't even know if he has anything up there, but maybe that was a little bit too harsh. But I'm just not
Wow.
I'm not a Kaminga guy. I'm really not. I think the
I
whole
wasn't either.
the whole saga was just a little bit too much, and this was the anticlimactic finish that we got. And then Porzingis to the Warriors. Honestly, I don't even know if he plays 10 games for them. I'm gonna be so real. Like you said, 10 straight. I don't think he plays 10 total.
Yeah, I'm saying I'd be shocked if he played like 10 straight games. But you said you don't think he plays 10 games.
I don't think he plays 10 games total for them this season, and that's how much I don't like this move for either side. So LL.
Yeah, listen, I give respect to the organization though. They know they have Steph Curry. At the end of the day, they're trying to stay somewhat competitive. They had to get rid of, the bad. They just didn't have the best relationship with Kaminga. And because like we're bashing Porzingis, but if he's healthy, this is actually a good move because he is a good rim protector, a good scorer, good player that can go out there and hoop with Curry. It's just the big if, you know what I mean? So that's what we're waiting on, the health thing. I think they reported that he is healthy and he's ready to play, by the way. So we'll see.
Bro, I
Yeah.
don't believe that. And you got to keep the same energy that you kept with the Wizards with AD with this team. There is no silver lining in this situation. They freaking suck.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when the deal happened on stream, I didn't really like it for either team either. Mainly because with Kaminga, all right, so he's free from the shackles of, whatever was going on in Golden State. But, you are going to a team where you're playing next to another forward who honestly, like the best version of Kaminga, you would kind of like to be a Jalen Johnson type player where you can do kind of like a little bit of everything really well, but it's also Jalen Johnson's team. So, I mean, you're not going to be in a situation where I'm going to have the ball and I'm going to cook and just kind of ignore Jalen Johnson who's just standing over there, right? I don't know how that's going to work. But if you're the Hawks, I mean, you gave up Porzingis, right? Who didn't really do a whole lot for them. Like I said, in the games he played, he helped them win, but he only played in 17 games. And then, I guess if with Kaminga, right, he's got the team option. So, worst case scenario, you could just decline the team option. He doesn't come back, or you could decline it and re-sign him, or you could accept it, move him again. I don't know, but the main thing is the Kaminga saga was over, and they were another team that was in the Giannis sweepstakes, which me, I said I thought that package was a very overrated package,
Terrible.
in my opinion. Just because I just felt like, okay, so you're gonna give up picks, you're gonna give up Draymond, you're gonna give up Kaminga and whatever other young players. Okay, well if you have Giannis, like you probably shouldn't be that bad. Like I said, you're banking on that the Warriors may be bad because the guys will be hurt. But I just think, what's the point? And does Giannis want to go there? Like we never really got any indications from him about where he wanted to go. It seemed like he was almost just kind of trolling at certain points. But either way, like you said, it's kind of one of the trades of the deadline where it's one where, like Top Knot said, to be fair, if Porzingis is healthy, he can play. He's good. We know what he can do. We saw what he did in Boston, right? Where he can post up, score on smaller guys, and shoot the three from the outside and block shots. But I just don't think it exists, right? That training staff is going to have a lot of work on their hands to be able to keep him healthy. But I just think once Butler went down, that was curtains on the season, right? Like I don't see a realistic pathway for them to make a run this year, right? Because you're going to have to wait for Butler to get healthy. That's not going to be until next season. And it's tough, right? Because this was a team that I think a lot of people looked at as, a real contender, right? Like a team where it's like, okay, you take away the top teams like OKC and Denver, who's realistically better than them? That's kind of what they were pitched as, right? And it didn't work out that way, uh, which was probably the most likely outcome.
Yeah,
So
called that.
yeah. So afterwards, those were kind of the main deals, right? There were a couple other smaller ones, right? But but those were the most significant ones, right? Like we had, what was it? It was like what? Phoenix bringing in Cole Anthony, right? And they basically moved Nick Richards. There were teams that made basically cost cutting moves, right? Like Denver didn't really do anything. They moved Hunter Tyson just to get under the tax, right? Phoenix got under the tax, right? LA added Luke Kennard, but he's in another expiring, just like Gabe Vincent, right? So not really much there. Got a 3-point shooter, but like I said, he's in the last year of his deal. Gave up a second. And then after that, you had three teams who did not make any moves at all, right? You had the San Antonio Spurs, the Miami Heat, and the Houston Rockets, right? And it's kind of, I guess, three somewhat different situations, there. So why don't we kind of explore like the conversation about like, those teams not really getting involved in the trade deadline market at all, right? Because, with the Spurs, right, that's a team where I think you look at them and you just say, it's an up and coming team. There's no real pressure for them to contend this year. So they really didn't have to do anything. They could have, I guess, if they really wanted to, but there may not have been anything available there, right? Like even a guy like a Murphy that might have cost like 3-4 thousand first round picks. It seems like what New Orleans was asking for, right? So it's better to probably just wait until the offseason, see how the playoffs go, and work your way from there, right? Then you have what was it, the Heat, right? They were looking for Giannis. They ended up not getting him. Maybe they get him in the summer. They were looking for Ja, didn't get him either. And I don't think there was really anything else that they really felt like was available. And then you have Houston, right, who didn't do anything either, right? And they're kind of in a semi different spot, but because they have a better record. But the thing is, they have the injuries, right? You have Fred VanVleet who's out. You have Steven Adams who's out. Those are two guys where they're not your best players, but they are guys that are important to the team that you probably would want. And the GM kind of told you, he basically said, right, like, yeah, we're probably just going to kind of chill this season and kind of just see where it goes, right? That's basically what he was kind of hinting at. And there were a handful of teams, right, where that was kind of the, when we say actions speak louder than words, right? I mean, his words told you that, but the actions of not doing anything at the deadline kind of showed that as well. And I would say even though the Lakers traded for Kennard, I think that was kind of also another thing too, where it's like they're going to go into the summer with cap space and probably overhaul the team in the summer, right? Because they don't really buy into what they have this year. So what did you guys think of those teams, right? In terms of the ones that really didn't make any moves. Do you feel like that there's a different reasoning there? Or do you feel like it's probably similar to what I was kind of talking about?
No, I agree with you. I just think the Spurs should have moved on from, maybe like a guy like Sohan or something like that. I think that would have potentially been beneficial, but there was probably little to no market, especially, what we saw some of these other guys going for in similar tiers, right? Houston, I think their hands were kind of tied. I would have preferred them to go out and gambled and, maybe given up a little something of value for, a guy
Right.
like Kobe White or something. I feel like that would have helped them out or even take a swing at Desumo. I feel like they could have offered something, maybe a little bit better than what Minnesota offered, but I don't know what the logic was there. Um, so that's kind of how I feel about it.
Then there was the Heat.
Oh yeah, the Heat. That team is hilarious because I feel like every season, every off season, we hear about them potentially taking these big swings, but all they do is freaking strike out, and hey, no surprise there. I didn't expect them to get Giannis. I didn't expect them to get Ja. Didn't expect them to get freaking Dame. I remember that was hilarious when that was all going on or whatever. But it continues, so no surprise there. Definitely need to do something because holy crap, they need some upgrades over there.
Um, Spurs, yeah, I think they should have traded Jeremy Shohan. I think he's not playing at all this year. Like, they moved past him. It's funny because he was actually an important piece for this team before
Yeah.
these players came in.
Yeah. Played point
And
guard.
yeah, I know. And then you got the Rockets. I think the Rockets are just in a weird spot at this moment. Like, I thought they were gonna go get Cam Thomas for something,
Ugh.
but they obviously didn't. They went to Milwaukee. Miami. To be fair, they always strike out on players, but for the job Morant, what they were asking for was unacceptable, man. I mean, they wanted Khalil Weir or Jaime, a first round pick, and another pick with another play with expiring. Job Morant's not worth that. So I'm not too mad about that. And then Giannis was never going to get traded, Chris. Like we knew this. We talked about this at the show. Like we was hoping for it to happen. You know, to talk about it during the live show and stuff like that. But I think the main thing was taking it to the off season. That's where more teams will become available, more picks will become available. But I do think Giannis is a weirdo as well because like he's playing both sides. I'm kind of at the point where, as a Heat fan, I don't even want him. Like he's too scared to come out and say, "Yeah, I want out." He's too scared. That's one thing I respect about Harden. Like when Harden, if he ain't getting extensions or he ain't getting bread or he don't think he's not happy, I'm on out. People like you know Oh, he's bouncing from team to team, and yeah, it's not a good look, but he's not like Dame, right? Dame's the same player. He was scared to ask out. Giannis is the same tier. They're scared to ask out, knowing damn right they don't want to be there at the time. You know what I mean? It's like you want to win championships, you want to compete. Milwaukee's not the team. You know what I mean? And then it's what he says. Yeah, I don't know how long I'll be here. Then it's like, I love Milwaukee. Bro, make your mind up, bro. Like, you're just like, you're saying different things every game. You know what I mean? So at this point, I think I'm kind of drained with the Giannis thing. And then the calf injury is concerning. Two injuries in a row with that. I think he's still a great player, but there's no excuse to the Miami Heat's front office. They needed to make a move. They didn't. And they're paying for it right now.
Are you surprised that Denver didn't really do anything? I mean, they just basically made a tax saving move, but they kind of feel like a team where like it would have been nice for them to kind of maybe do something small, bring in like another ball handler, right? Because right now, since Jokic has come back, they're like 2-4. Not completely his fault, but they've also been horrifically injured. Where as soon as one guy comes back, boom, somebody else goes out. Like Top Notch mentioned, and it's funny. Like back, just like a quick Giannis thing. It was funny how like 5 minutes after the stream began, it was like, yeah, not Giannis isn't going anywhere. May have been before we even started, but either way, with the Denver thing, it would have been nice just for them to kind of bring in maybe one other ball handler, just because it feels like they may need it. But I guess you could just make the case like just get healthy, right? Just get healthy because we've seen very few games with them at full strength, and that's kind of wild, right? That like them, Denver, Spurs. I mean, every team has had injuries this year, but it's just kind of funny in the case of even like an Oklahoma City, where it's like they're still sitting at the top of the Western Conference, and we've barely seen their best players play together this year. But like, do you feel like Denver should have done something, or do you just kind of like where they're at and just get healthy?
Get healthy. I think that team is
Okay.
underrated. I think they had one of the best off seasons in the league. I think we talked about that. There's a reason why you picked them to win the title. So I think they should have stayed pat, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, I'm fine with what they did.
Mhm.
Um, I like what they got over there.
Yeah. Then buyout market wise, not really a whole lot out there. We did have Cam Thomas, who I think surprisingly got waived. I didn't expect that at all. That was like a surprise towards the end of the live stream that we did. And then he ended up going to the Bucks. Don't have an issue with him going there. I mean, I guess especially if Giannis is going to be out, you're going to need some other guys to help with the scoring. Doesn't help them with defense, and that's kind of the main issue they have is they can't really stop anybody. But I guess this was probably the end game for Cam Thomas, where he wasn't going to be in Brooklyn much longer. I'm just surprised he got waived, like not even bought out, just cut. They're just like, we don't want you. Which when he got the qualifying offer, you figured he wouldn't be a Brooklyn Net after the season ended. I thought he might get traded, but he didn't even get traded. He just got cut and then ended up going to join another team. So we'll see what happens with the Bucks. Is there any hope that Giannis comes back and then they make a late push? Because I mean they're not that far back from the play-in spot, right? They're 3 games, I think, behind Atlanta, and then what, like 5 games behind Miami, and then like 5.5 behind Orlando.
Yeah, no, not happening.
Do you at least like the signing?
No, it doesn't do jack diddly squat. I mean, cool, Cam Thomas. Like, wow. Shout out to him. I'm a Thomas fan, but bro, it's the freaking Bucks, and it doesn't mean jack.
Yeah, I mean, I get why he signed with them. He said he felt wanted. They always wanted him. So, he went to a place where he thinks he's going to thrive and get the opportunity to make his next big contract. So I get it.
Yeah, so pretty wild. I guess, to kind of close it off, post trade deadline, what teams are we potentially looking at to maybe make like a late season push, right? That we've kind of seen the last several seasons where there's always like that one team, in each conference, maybe two, where you look up and all of a sudden, boom, they're winning every game left and right. And then all of a sudden they're like in the second round where you don't expect it, or maybe even the conference finals. Like what teams are we kind of thinking of?
Mm, I mean, it's kind of hard to say considering most of the big time deals were, lottery teams, but I guess Cleveland. I mean, it wouldn't surprise
Yeah,
me if
that's
Cleveland
the
goes.
team I would be looking at too.
Yeah, it wouldn't
In the
surprise me
East.
if Cleveland goes to like the Eastern Conference Finals now, just because they have James Harden. I think that could potentially happen. Like if he doesn't have a bad series at all.
Right. That's the
Mi-
team I would be looking at.
Miami Heat.
Is there any hope for the Orlando Magic?
No.
Yes.
Because I would say I think that's another team that I actually do think could make a late season push. Now that
They're
it
all
seems like they're getting healthier, right? Like Wagner's coming back. I think he came off the bench in a minutes restriction. Suggs is back. I'm curious to see what they do. I guess Black now moves into the 6-man role. I'm curious to see what that looks like. Their center rotation is kind of iffy, right? Because you got Carter, and then off the bench, I guess Mo Wagner's back. You got Goga. Isaac seems like he might be out, in and out, basically. I don't know. But they also have a schedule that's not super difficult the rest of the way. So I feel like that could probably be a team where, and that's kind of been the MO with them, right? Where it's like they've kind of been able to close the season strong. There was a crazy stat where this might have been 15 games or so ago, where basically they had like the same record. It was like 23-21 for 3 straight seasons, right? The same record in a row. So and each time, right, they've ended up closing on a okay note, right? Like last year they finished 500, so they basically went like 18-20 or something like that, or maybe my math is off a little bit. And then the year before, right? Then they made the playoffs, right? And they played the Cavs. We'll see what it looks like this year. But I would say Cleveland and Orlando, I think, at least in the East, are the two teams I would look at. The West is a crapshoot, right? Just because most of the teams that we kind of expect to be in there are already there. And I just don't necessarily know if the lower seeds in the Western Conference are going to make late pushes because everybody after 10 is tanking. So then maybe you could argue maybe Portland, maybe the Clippers if Garland plays, but I think the East one is kind of the one I would look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to the postseason.
Yeah. So pretty cool. So basically now that pretty much concludes today's episode of the Off Ball Takes podcast. Again, if you want to join um or leave comments on any of our posts or any of our socials, just go to @the OBT podcast. Of course, thanks for also tuning into the live stream. We appreciate that. Continue to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.